As co-chair of the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus, you've helped bring together Indigenous youth from many nations around the world. What have those conversations taught you?
Listening to our young leaders that come from all over, the one message always arises that young Indigenous peoples are not the leaders of tomorrow. We are leading the way today.
I'm Ben Ryman, and this is Behaviour Speak. Welcome back to Behaviour Speak. Today's episode is part one of a two-part conversation with Katisha Paul. Katisha is a member of the Tsartlip First Nation, an Indigenous leader, international advocate, former youth representative, and current women's representative for the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, and the founder of Nipunek. Over the past several years, she has become a powerful voice in conversations about Indigenous rights, environmental stewardship, youth leadership, women's leadership, and sovereignty. But before any of those titles came into her life, there was a young girl who simply wanted to be safe. In the first part of our conversation, Katisha takes us through the experiences that shaped her. She reflects on family, culture, identity, and the teachings of her ancestors. She shares openly about surviving childhood abuse, the years she spent believing she couldn't use her voice, and the journey that eventually transformed that silence into advocacy. It's a deeply personal conversation about resilience, responsibility, and the ways our experiences can shape the people we become. More than anything, it's a story about finding your voice and choosing to use it, not only for yourself, but for others who still may be struggling to find theirs. A content note before we begin. This episode includes a discussion of childhood sexual abuse, violence, and trauma. Please take care while listening and engage with this conversation in whatever way feels right for you. I'm grateful to Katisha for her trust, her vulnerability, and her willingness to share these experiences. This is part one of my conversation with Katisha Paul. Hi, Katisha.
Hello.
Welcome to Behaviour Speak. Thanks so much for being here. We've been trying to make this happen for quite some time, and even in this sort of short period, your journey has continued to evolve. You founded a new organization, stepped into the role of women's representative with the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, and you continue your international work, and you've taken on so many new opportunities to advocate for Indigenous communities. Before we get into all this, maybe we can start with a kind of a simple question of who is Katisha today?
Ait square antipate up yapora quotes for Sostin Lethan that Tsartlip Stalium Sunamersilch, Heitzapka Homashlium, Heitzapka Homoch Mistimoch, Dicho Mach Noiko Ait Squalo and not Sama Mistimoch. Kashqua La Benchniff Nukwa Quilks for Sauce and Squatchy Chat Na and Kukwa Eleanor Wells and Kukwa Iona Paul and Spapsa Alec Dan Kukshimushka. So I always like to start off with ensuring that I'm speaking both of my languages, recognizing my ancestors, bringing them into the space, and recognizing my names that I carry, which are Katisha Paul, Tsepyapulwit, and Little Angel, which means Quilksha sauce. So I am really honored to be here. I am from the Tsartlip Stalium Swinomish and Silk nations, and that's who I am. I'm a Chomo Shleni. I'm a woman of the land. I am the oldest of 9 children, and I take on a lot of responsibility as an oldest granddaughter on one side of my family, and on the other side of my family where there's over 35 cousins and over a dozen great-grandchildren. I am just happy to be a sister. I'm happy to be the weird auntie or the one who's always talking about the environment and telling people that they need to recycle and arguing with people who are making choices in the family that will harm the environment. I've just been the annoying one overall growing up, I think. High inspiration from books like Dr. Seuss and I Speak for the Trees. Another one of my favorite cartoons or childhood memories watching was the Bee Movie. So the entire thing is just about protecting the bees and the honey and the earth. And those are the small things that really shaped me as a child. The larger things that shaped me is where I come from, the lands in which I come from, the water that I come from, the food that I eat, our salmon. I've gone through times in my life where I wasn't able to eat any salmon because the salmon runs were so low. And then that inspired me to go on and advocate nationally or internationally for the salmon simply because I wanted it on my family's table.
Hmm.
It's the little things that we usually really crave and that we need, and it drives me. It
Hmm.
drives me to be who I am today. My family will oftentimes make fun of me for small things, and I like that. That's who we are as Kwamokwistimok. We kind of just, like, poke and prod
Hmm.
and use laughter as our medicine, and if that is to be seen, um, or alternatively seen as a form that shapes us, that's exactly what it is. It's our jokes. It's the way that we live. It's who
Hmm.
we are. And I think that's why I'm so proud to be strange or have a weird line of thinking that kind of connects things that shouldn't be connected, into various forms of life, and that I'll just have those various aha moments, um, within those connections.
Hmm. I know when people introduce you publicly, there's often a long list of accomplishments. What do you see when you look in the mirror?
Um, I really see a woman who has done everything to be here.
Hmm.
I see my great grandmothers. When I'm working with my hands, when I'm speaking, um, I can feel them moving through me, or when I'm speaking, I'm saying the words that I can imagine that my great grandparents were speaking on.
Hmm.
I'm moving forward this legacy that our ancestors moved while they were here, so that way the ones in the future could look back and see hopefully me in the mirror. And
Hmm.
that's how we work, right? Our genetics, we pass down, not just the way we look, but it's who we are and the way we carry ourselves, the epigenetics that allow us to really hone into what it is that we believe in. And that's
Hmm.
why when I look in the mirror, I also see our inherent rights. I see a woman who deserves to be protected, a woman who deserves to be happy, a woman who deserves to speak our language and sing our songs and carry on those traditions. And I also see a woman who is going to be a life giver at some
Hmm.
point in her life. And that to me forces me into this state of celebration of the excellence of who we are. There's
Hmm.
so much that has happened to our people, and to simply just be here is beautiful.
Hmm. A phrase stayed with me from one of our first chats. You talked about the hope of a little girl who just wanted to be safe. Can you tell us about her?
Yeah, that's a totally different girl that I see in the mirror, and sometimes I
Hmm.
see her still, reflections upon why I'm here or how I'm here, especially when I'm sitting on those grand stages at the Expert Mechanism of Indigenous Peoples in Geneva, Switzerland. It was one of those moments
Hmm.
I looked out and I thought about who I was as a little girl, stuck in a life of need, a life of survival, and it just really serves as an appreciation point because I haven't always been this loud. I haven't always been this
Hmm.
proud. I haven't always moved the way that I do to make sure that I am seen. I always wanted to hide in the corners. I didn't want to use my voice, and that was simply because I didn't know how. I unfortunately went through about 6 years of sexual violence in my home,
Hmm.
and going through that every single night for years as a young child in elementary school and beginning of high school. It's not something that anybody should go through, but unfortunately, that's a reality that a lot of our Indigenous peoples live with. It.
Hmm.
And it's not just the girls, it's our boys too. It's harm, it's intergenerational trauma. It consisted of me finding ways to use my actual toys as a young girl, and I would line them along the floor before I would go to bed, the little pianos that I would hope that the man would step on, so that would create some sort of noise for me that my
Wow.
mother would hear in the next room because I didn't know how to make that noise myself. I would
Hmm.
use the loudest objects in my room to also assist me in these moments. And it was not like I was weak. That was the only form of survival that I knew of, because I didn't know that I could use my voice. There was dreams that would occur during that time where I would be just about to say something, just about to phone the police, just about to phone my grandmother to tell her what was happening. And then suddenly, as I would open my mouth to scream, to say anything, it was as if there was nothing there. Screaming at the top of my lungs, and nobody could hear me for years. And that's truly why I am the way that I am now. I'm not saying that I'm blaming who I am on my intergenerational trauma that occurred. It's because of that I was forced into a state of survival. And from that survival, I learned how to adjust that to use my voice, not just for myself, for other people. I've always had a deep appreciation and love and care and respect for others and relationships. And I think that's why I didn't say anything. I loved my mom so much, and I knew that there was a love between herself and her partner that I didn't want to destroy. So I feel like I gave up my own body, my own innocence, my own soul as a child to allow that to happen, because they had two children of their own. My amazing sisters, Yara and Shawnale, I love them so much. And I used that as a point of protection too, to protect them, because I thought that if that man was harming me, he wouldn't be harming my sisters. And
Wow.
I needed to make sure that they were safe. I would do anything to make sure that my sisters were safe, and I would do anything to make sure that my mom had love in her life. I didn't know what love meant in that sort of form, and I thought that that was the epitome. I thought that seeing them laughing and giggling and having the time of their lives was it. What I didn't see was the arguments. What I didn't see was the hurt, the pain that was caused. And it wasn't until I started going into my own relationships later on in life where I realized that that wasn't the standard. That was not even the ground. That was below the ground. And having the ability to use that as a point of reference has really helped heal myself in my own relationships as a woman. Noticing relationships occurring around me as a young leader, who just wants to also protect all of the women and children that are around us. I use my experience, the harm, the hurt, the pain, to motivate me to make sure that everybody else is safe, that everybody else is happy, that everybody else is good. And even my own partner now will say, I just don't know how to say no. I don't know how to not use my voice anymore, because I was driven so far into not being allowed to use my voice, or thinking that I wasn't allowed to use my voice. That once I broke through that barrier where I finally opened my mouth to speak, to share, to be loud, to be proud, and to be that advocate that I needed for myself, it's never stopped. It's just kept on going. Nobody can keep me quiet anymore. And that little girl would be so surprised. I no longer have to use toys or objects in my space around me to assure that I'm going to be safe. I get to do that for myself. I get to actually voice my opinions and voice how I feel and understand when something is not right. And that was what was lacking when I was younger, right? There's never that education in school to say, oh, you shouldn't be harmed in this way, because it's such a stigma within our families, especially Indigenous families who are stuck so far away. In my instance, I was 45, 35 kilometers down a dirt road, no cell service, hardly any internet service. I'm pretty sure we were still in dial-up at that point. I remember the noises, and I just had no idea of what was possible. I didn't know the standards of love. I didn't understand my rights as a young Indigenous woman in those moments. And so now, for me, it's my obligation, my responsibility to ensure as many people around me in all of the circles that I surround myself with have an understanding of our rights and what it is to feel safe, what it is to feel love, what it is to feel respected.
Hmm. Hmm. It's a incredible story. Heartbreaking yet powerful. How were you? What changed for you that you were able to speak?
Actually, um, unfortunately, I should
Hmm.
say,
Hmm.
unfortunately, I wasn't able to get my own justice in that moment after those years of abuse.
Hmm.
It was silent, remained inside of me, figuratively, literally, disgustingly enough,
Hmm.
for a couple more years after I moved away from that home.
Hmm.
I was living over in Richmond with my grandparents, and I get home one day from grade 8, grade 9, and there sitting at the table was my grandparents and my dad and his wife, and they looked at me and I could see something was wrong, but I can also see, like, a whole bunch of, like, hurt and pain in their eyes,
Hmm.
like they did something wrong. I had
Hmm.
no idea what was happening. And then they explained to me that they got a phone call from, some police station, and there was an investigation that was happening because that man had, assaulted another young girl from another relationship that
Hmm.
he got into. Um, so he assaulted the daughter, and it went on to this entire court case, and I was asked to be, um, able to give my statement. So, of course, right away, I said yes, but my family were so shocked because they had no idea that this was happening for all of those years. And
Hmm.
to them, I can imagine that they had probably thought that I had failed in some sort of capacity to protect me. And that's
Sure.
exactly what they voiced, right? Um, I was always like a bright, bubbly, weird child, happy, wanting to help others all of the time. I can't imagine that this would be something that they would have ever thought was possible because I did really, really good at masking it.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes that looked like me hiding away behind a book reading, or sometimes it would just look like me going off running somewhere into a forest and plopping down and hanging out with the trees at some point. And so receiving that phone call, starting that point of the investigation, was quite a shock, not just to myself, but to the family because
Hmm.
they couldn't imagine that something would harm me, uh, being so young. And so it wasn't even me that opened up that door of opportunity to use my voice. It was another young family. And I sometimes have regret. Actually, I always have regret that I didn't speak up sooner because then I wouldn't
Hmm.
have to go through that situation of having to help somebody so young. And I use that as a point as well to make sure in my mind, if I ever have the opportunity to speak up and to save somebody or to help somebody, I'm going to use it all of the
Hmm.
time. That's why I am the way that I am. I can't say no because if I believe if I say no, or if I don't delegate an opportunity to voice an opinion or voice a recommendation or help advocate or lobby somewhere, that somebody's going to get harmed.
Hmm.
Somebody in the future might get hurt. It's not just thinking about those that are living right now, but if we don't act now, what's to be said later on? What should we be doing now to help those in the future? And
Hmm.
that's become a part of my own working fabric. And I don't mind it.
Hmm.
Sometimes we have to go through these major hurdles that shape you as a human being, that drive you, that motivate you. And whether those are negative drivers or positive drivers, this is where we are now.
Hmm. Good timing for a pause. I don't want to dwell too much on the past, but I have one more question. And you said, like, during this horrible, traumatic, awful, heinous experience, the whole time it was about protecting others for you, your siblings, your mother. Where did that come from?
Mm. I believe it's the inherent strength. Us as Kwamok Shlady, the women of the land, have always been so strong. It it starts in the womb. We're just made to survive, unfortunately, within the settler colonial institutions' imposition on these rules and these societal norms. We're just forced to survive. But even before that, before all of that, before colonization, us as Kwamoshlini, as women of the land, we're matriarchs. That's who we are. And that comes with the responsibility that states that we have to protect. We have to guide. We have to ensure the safety of others. We have to ensure all people are loved, respected, and are treating each other kindly. That's where it comes from. It wasn't as though somebody told me at some point in my lifetime that, oh, you're going to be really badly harmed and you can't say anything, but you have to protect other people. Nobody gave me that lesson. Nobody told me what to do in those moments. It was just a feeling. It was a feeling that I acted on for years, a feeling that I knew that I needed to protect my family, regardless of the harm that that caused me as a human being.
Wow. Even before all this harm, you also said you were born prematurely, and people predicted physical, mental, developmental disabilities. How much did these expectations shape your childhood?
Yeah, so I was born 2 months premature and in an incubator for about 2 months afterwards. I still have the scars to show.
Wow.
And the doctors went in. They didn't tell my parents. They actually had a conversation with my grandparents to tell them that I wasn't going to live very long, or if I did, that I was going to have all of these abnormalities, wasn't going to be able to speak very well, or develop mentally or physically in the same way that other young people would. Um, Years go by. I'm in elementary school at some point, and my great grand uncle and grand auntie had seen my own resilience as a young woman, a young girl, and stated that my name was going to be Quilksha Sauce, which means little angel. And I used that name as a way to hold myself up, to state that no matter what's said, no matter what people believe, and no matter what preconceived notions are made about me, that doesn't really matter. um, we always rise. We always tend to excel in everything that we do. Myself as an individual, if I can't do something right, I'm going to do it over and over and over again until I get it right. And if I can't get it right, I admit that I can't. But that's a part of Quilksha Sauce, being that little angel, having that gift of living every single day that I can't be more grateful for. Being Quilksha Sauce, being little angel is who I am to my essence and my core. It's a little girl who should not have survived, but is thriving now.
You talk about how a lot of folks have all these assumptions, and you've also shared that people assume you come from privilege from based on kind of where they see you now. Beyond everything you've shared already, what is it that people don't understand about your journey that brings them to this?
Mm, I think one of the pieces is that I've never gone to school far enough to complete education in your standard sense. And regardless of that fact, I've still traveled the world. I've been invited to speak in Geneva, Switzerland, and in New York. I went to New Zealand, and I get to go over to Ottawa all of the time to go and lobby the government and speak at large national conferences. I hold all of these events and I host them, and that seems like a luxurious life, I would believe. And there is privilege in there because I have a passport. And a lot of Indigenous peoples can't get their own passports, or they can't travel and they're restricted. People are being detained because they have traveled to a far off land and they can't return home. I have a point of privilege because I have the freedom of mobilization. And that's not to say that that's not something that I haven't worked for. I work hard every single day to ensure that these opportunities are available. And just because I haven't gotten my education doesn't mean that I'm not educated through our Kwamok ways of knowing, being, and seeing. And oftentimes, it's kind of funny. I present as somebody who is very fashionable. I can say that. I love clothes. I love them so much. When I put on a skirt and a nice blouse, or a very gorgeous dress or a very gorgeous jacket, I'm not just wearing a piece of clothing. That is my armor. That is who I am. I feel like if I put on a beautiful outfit, people on the outside will see somebody that they have to take seriously because I can present myself in such a way. And sometimes I feel as though that's misconstrued to lead people to believe that I have access to a lot. But what some people don't understand is that I actually rent a lot of these clothing items that I have, and they're returned back to those original designers. And that's a form of our Kwamok economy. We share, we give. I love the artists that I work with, and it allows them to have their clothing placed on stages around the world, and in front of hundreds of people. And that's my way of giving back too. But it's not that I get to take these pieces home. I do wish that I could, but it's just, I need to feel that power and that strength that the fashion gives me. I sometimes feel as though that's very, oh, what's the word? Fashionable items could feel synthetic to a human. But to me, to show up in the world and just feel beautiful, it allows me to also show people what's inside of my mind, not just what's on my skin. And it allows access. My great-grandparents, they used to tell their children, you have to walk like them, you have to talk like them, you have to dress like them, just to fit in. But at the same time, learn how to do the dance. Show up as who you are, do their dance moves, sing like them, drink like them, eat like them, but you think like a Kwamok Mistimoch. You think and you act and you move and you sing and you dance exactly like your ancestors have. And it's this intricate dance that we have to do in order to show up in this world to get anything done, because we have to. We understand as Kwamok Mistimok, as people of this land, that our settler visitors are here to stay. These points of privilege that I have come from messages from my ancestors that said, move, act, don't be, act, in the same way that settlers do. Give the facade that we understand enough about the Hunitim world. But while you're doing that, have the underlying tones, the messages, the key movements, the key protocols laid out in every single one of those actions. And it's no longer a point of privilege. What you're doing, what we're all trying to do as Kwamok Mistimok, is implement our own laws into the ways that we are. So I use these points of privilege, the ability that I have a passport, the ability for me to move freely in between countries and in between jurisdictions, to use the voice, to implement the threads and interwoven laws that we have into the society that we're forced to live upon now.
You often speak about your ancestors and your great-grandparents, your great-uncle. How have they shaped the way you understand leadership?
And in 1969, when the Union of BC Indian Chiefs formed, and in 1980, when the Constitution Express moved forward and gathered thousands of Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island and actually across the world, they had nothing. They hardly had the ability to get lawyers, but still, they got up and they moved. They moved people. They inspired people. They talked, but they also put that talking alongside action. And they ensured that our rights as Kwamok Mistimok are recognized, not just for the generation that was living then, but for the generations moving forward. They did the groundwork. We have Calder, Delgamu, Silcotin, Sparrow, all setting those roots of our Indigenous legal architecture within Canadian society. But they did that without the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. What they teach me is the importance of action, the importance of asserting our rights, and the importance of communication. We have to be able to communicate, not just with leadership, not just with the ones who are making the decisions, but we have to communicate with all of our relatives throughout all of the nations that we are serving. What they did was magnificent. The Indian homemakers of BC would have cupcake sales and bingos just to be able to fund the Indian Brotherhood of BC to go out and lobby. Children used to sleep underneath the meeting tables. People used to sleep in their cars just to get into meetings. And now we have this ability to move freely, to travel together. But I believe what we're missing is the intergenerational strength and excellence that we would be able to gather if we just allowed more people the opportunity to share what's on their mind. Share the impacts of the words that we use, like free, prior, and informed consent, sovereignty, or self-determination. Somebody who's out fishing right now and smoking their fish will not tell you the definition of sovereignty. Instead, they're going to go tell you how to fillet that fish and how to smoke it. But in essence, that's what it is. That's the beauty that we're living in. And for us to have the opportunity to hold on to the legends of who walked before us is a gift.
Hmm.
We have Mildred Poplar, who just released her book, Why Our Lands Are Not for Sale. And she has a detailed account of what really happened during those times. Art Manuel has a book that also has a detailed account of what it meant to be the one to lead and alongside many other leaders for the Constitution Express and go all throughout the world to Geneva to see the Sápmi, to go to New Zealand and other places just to give action to the words that we're using. That's what it's about. They didn't just sit around. We've never been idle in any case. Think about what happened with Meech Lake Accord. Well, when they were trying to separate as Quebec and get certain rights as greater citizens of Canada or specialized citizens, I forget the wording now. When Meech Lake Accord happened, Elijah Harper said no because he was capable. He was an MP at the time, an Indigenous man MP at that time of Meech Lake Accord consistently said no because Kwamokh Mistimokh, First Nations peoples, Indigenous peoples were not involved in the conversation. That's what it's like to take the action and not just sit and be complacent. Our ancestors teach us that about the harms of being complacent. When something is being done for us and not by us, that costs not just Indigenous people's money, Canadian taxpayer money. Our ancestors, I wish they were here right now because they would tell us what to do. And we would get up like that and just do it because they had a sort of assertiveness about them. It wasn't a laid back, relaxed, oh, somebody else is going to do it. For our ancestors, they got up because they knew nobody else was going to advocate for us. We gathered and we united in our voices to make anything happen. We fought for women's rights to be able to simply vote, to be able to get a lawyer. We fought to be able to gather in groups of more than 3 people at a time. We vote to be able to move freely within jurisdictions. We were able to move people to protect the environment. When major projects were happening in the time that our ancestors were alive, they didn't allow that to happen. There were barricades everywhere. They were on the front lines. They were singing, they were dancing, they were creating their own constitutions within each of their own respective territories and telling people exactly what Indigenous laws were and how to implement those within our jurisdictions. We weren't asking for our land back. We were getting it.
What lessons from your great uncle continue to guide you?
I was actually just going through the resolutions for the Union of BC Indian Chiefs and some of their archival websites on UBCIC's website. And he passed 49 resolutions where they're moving or seconding them in his time. And for him, he wasn't actually a chief. He was just a man who wanted to get it done. And he worked for the Union of BC Indian Chiefs for a long time. And at some point, there was an election that occurred for what was then called the co-chair. And within that election, somebody put his name forward to be a nominee to be a co-chair. Bylaws at that point had stated, sorry, I'm just gonna, it's very loud.
Yeah.
So for for Philip Paul, he worked there for years at the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. He was a staff member, but he would just get up and go. He would help behind closed doors, move these resolutions, move these advocacies, move action, and help organize all Indigenous peoples that he could gather. And I could see that in the writings. I can see that in the resolutions that were created, that were moved and seconded by him, or the ones that he had helped draft, or the way that he would speak. There's videos of Philip Paul speaking in the archives too for the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, and it just excites me. Because of the way that they talked, because of the way that they would just inspire people to get up and go. And for me to see all of the resolutions that he had passed, I believe it's about 49 of them right now in the archives that I could find. And that tells me that he wanted to go. He wanted to help anywhere. And it wasn't just like one single subject that he would focus on. He focused on every department, whether that was something within the governing structure of the union or something that was happening externally, a nation that needed help, a school board that needed help, a child that needed help. If he wanted to move forward on environmental protection, he seems to have had a full scope. And there is a video in the archives that states at some point somebody nominated him to be the co-chair. The bylaws at that point had stated that in order to be a co-chair, you had to then be a chief. So, of course, after that person had nominated Philip to be the co-chair, somebody else stood up and, said, can't actually do that. This is why. The rest of the meeting goes on for that rest of the day. And then the next day, the same issue gets brought up while the elections are ongoing. And somebody states that even though he's just a staff member, even though he's not a chief, this man has been capable of voicing the rights of our Indigenous peoples and protecting who it is that we are as the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. So then they go forward, put his name on the ballot, and he ended up winning. And he became an integral piece of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs history, of that movement, alongside our great leaders such as my great-grandparents, Evelyn Paul and Benjamin Paul, Cora Wells and Daniel Wells. These were the people who worked at the grassroots level, who worked in the nations to make sure that people were fed while these meetings were happening. And it was a community effort. It wasn't just 100 or so people at these meetings. There was hundreds of people at these meetings listening to people like Philip Paul, Grand Chief Stephen Point, because they were excited. There was a sort of excitement about the Indian movement, the Indian struggle, uniting our people, and they really harnessed that power in that time to continue the conversation forward from the dinner table talks all the way to the talks that they were having over across the nation and internationally too. I think we're good.
Do you ever feel like you're continuing something they started?
Absolutely. From the moment that I got asked to be a nominee for the Union of BC Indian Chiefs youth representative role, I went into a deep dive of the history. I've been a nerd about it ever since, and looking back to see those movements that they made through those resolutions, the actions that they had helping communities in that time. Everybody was so energetic and they worked together. Maybe not well at some moments, because we do have some of those points in our history where it just didn't work because of sometimes it didn't work out because of bureaucratic processes or certain Western colonial institutions, aka the government, using a divide and conquer tactic within our chiefs to break that unity. But it's never been broken. We're still here. And because we're still here, I want to keep that spirit of our ancestors who started the Union of BC Indian Chiefs alive. So from the moment that I was elected as the youth representative, I knew that this was my family too. They're home. Listening to the chiefs have the same countenance and the same excitement in their tone when they're talking about the rights that we have today and what we're fighting for. And looking back again to the archives, I can see their ancestors speaking through them. I can feel the energies that they have, and that excites me now to this day. And the union's not getting rid of me ever. I have been telling people that I will at some point become the vice president, maybe secretary treasurer, I'll become the president. And then after I'm done being the president, then they'll have to elect me as the elders representative. And who knows how long I'll stay for the elders representative role. It's the spirit that I love. The need to simply be a part of the struggle that we have to carry forward. When we say that, the struggle, it sounds so negative because it is, but it's a part of the unity to say that we're in this struggle together. And the struggle that our ancestors faced back in 1969 when we started is the same struggle that we're facing today. And the only thing that we can do now is protect the future from having to live in the same way that we are. And that's only going to be done when more of our people from the Union of BC Indian Chiefs and the BC Assembly of First Nations, for the First Nations Summit, all Indigenous organizations hold space for those individuals like my young self, as that little girl, to learn how to use our voice. Because that wasn't given to many of us. And if we had just known that there was somebody out there fighting for us, then maybe there would be more socioeconomic advantages for our people. We just understand what opportunities arise or who is there to lend a helping hand. That's how we create the change that's needed.
And that's where we're going to leave this conversation for today. Katisha's story is one of the most powerful journeys of resilience and self-discovery we've ever shared on Behaviour Speak. In this first part, we heard about the experiences that shaped her, the ancestors who continue to guide her, and the young girl who simply wanted to be safe and heard. We also heard how that journey ultimately led her to find her voice and use it in service of others. We shift from the story of finding a voice to the story of what happens when that voice is used. We'll explore Katisha's work with the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, her advocacy on the international stage, Indigenous sovereignty, climate leadership, repatriation, and her vision for future generations. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in part 2.